Everyone, today I am going to be briefly discussing a film that I think has been sort of overlooked. I don't think a lot of people talk about this film, and I think it would be cool if more people would know about it. And this film in particular is called Zodiac. Now, the interesting thing about Zodiac is it's not really based on anything to do with what people think of when they think of Zodiac or Zodiac symbols or star constellations or anything. This has to do with a serial killer that actually existed within the 1960s and 70s, going on sort of a rampage within the California, San Francisco Bay Area. And the interesting thing about this film is that not only is it based on a true story, but it's actually based upon a non-fictional book that somebody wrote. So I think the people involved in this film really wanted to try to get it down to the very serious and important points of how these crimes happened and who was involved, and give us a kind of understanding of the people who were involved in trying to bring this particular serial killer to justice. And this is really basically what the movie focuses on. It actually doesn't really focus on the serial killer, which is really what a lot of horror films try to do. And this film in particular is classified as a mystery thriller. So again, when you have a mystery thriller, that's more focused in on not really the serial killer or the psychology of the serial killer, but rather the people who are trying to catch the serial killer. And there are three people in particular that should be of note in this movie. And one is Jake Gyllenhaal, who basically plays our main character, who's named Robert Graysmith. And basically, he's actually he actually doesn't really hold a really high position within the beginning of the film. He's not like a detective or a journalist or anything. He's just a political cartoonist for the San Francisco Chronicle. Like, that's his job. That's it. But the interesting thing is he has a really a big talent when it comes to puzzles and figuring out like what different symbols mean, and he has this like kind of passionate hobby for it, and he seems to be really good at it, and he sort of ends up helping with this particular case, and you'll kind of see how his character develops throughout the film, and how they sort of give a somewhat of a context to his personal life. There's these other side issues that he kind of deals with. But since this is basing itself on true events, it kind of doesn't have the typical, I guess you could say, 3-act structure of the character kind of going off on a journey and then having everything being resolved in a nice little bow. I don't feel like this film does that, at least from the way that I interpreted it. And not only is he a big part in this case, but also Mark Ruffalo, who plays an SFPD or San Francisco Police Department detective named David Tashi, and he's really you'll see how he's also really invested in this case. He just knows only the kind of criminal side of the murders, and he doesn't really understand like the serial killer's mindset, unlike Jake Gyllenhaal's character, because as you will see throughout the film, this particular serial killer, who's called Zodiac, that's hence the title, he leaves these notes that have all these different kinds of symbols in them, and they sort of mean something, and Jake Gyllenhaal throughout the film sort of deciphers these kinds of messages, and these messages he's sending to to not only, I guess, the police department, but he's also sending them to the newspaper, and it seems like he wants to put a name for himself out there. It seems like he wants to show off to people somehow, and you'll kind of see this as Jake Gyllenhaal goes through kind of translating the serial killer's notes, and it's, you kind of get sort of a little bit of a mindset that he has, but that's not really the main focus. It's more about trying to put the pieces together and figure out who this guy, the Zodiac, is. Then we also have Robert Downey Jr. in this movie, big names here, who plays Paul Avery, and he's a crime reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle, and you'll see how he's with Jake Gyllenhaal in certain scenes. But the interesting thing about this film is sort of just how they go through and trying to solve this crime. So it is a lot more plot-driven than character-driven. The characters do have kind of this distinction about them, and you can tell one from the other. Obviously, Robert Downey Jr. is obviously hamming it up to the camera in this movie. You will see him have a big presence. Even if he's not given that much screen time, he still chews the scenery up pretty well in this movie. I would say the same for the other actors, but there's something about Robert Downey Jr. that just knows how to present himself on the screen. So even though I would say he's probably one of the characters that gets left in the background, he still manages to come off as a little bit more of a lighthearted character that's somewhat entertaining in a way, because he kind of takes away all of the kind of gruesome aspects of the film. And you will see how he tries to stand up for himself at points, and you'll kind of see his involvement, but he's not really there for all that much of the film. So I just don't want people going into the film thinking that Robert Downey Jr. is going to be like how he is in Iron Man, and it's like, no, he's not. He's a side character here. We mainly get Jake Gyllenhaal and Mark Ruffalo, and we kind of go back and forth between these different people who are all working on the case. And it actually does start out with the actual murders. Like, it will show you some how certain people were murdered, how certain cases sort of unfolded. It is not what I do like about this film is that even though it can be violent at times, it doesn't like over glorify you. It tries to keep the focus on the mystery, and I kind of like how it's going to that more traditional route of you know, kind of good guys versus bad guys, because like when you read like what the Zodiac writes and what he basically says in his letters, it just makes you want to find the guy and, you know, bring him to justice. And I felt like I was on board with these people who were trying to bring this case up and bring it to light. And what I like too is how it, not only the fact that it's based on a true story, but we get kind of a more real, we get more characters that I feel are a little bit more real, and we get sort of a story that's a little bit more like real life. And a lot of these times when crimes have occurred for so much long and they have not found the killer, there's always these other crimes that come up, and then people have to suddenly, you know, get off the initial crime that they were working with and go on into other things that maybe that they could find the killer for. So you really do see this aspect in the film, and it takes up a good portion of it to the point where you feel like this is how people really handle these cases in real life. You do feel like this was how cases were like back then. And you do feel like you are within like the 1970s, 60s too, you know. Robert Downey Jr. sometimes has that kind of get up with these kinds of heeled boots, and you know, it just has this kind of atmosphere that I think works for the time for that time period that these crimes were taking place. So I think overall it sets itself up good to where I feel like it's real enough for a Hollywood film. And obviously I'm not going to give away the ending or who the Zodiac killer is, but I will say that it's not a I wouldn't say it's not really like, you know, like I've said before, it's not really like one of those Hollywood type endings where it wraps it up in a bow for you all nicely and everything's answered for you. It still kind of leaves you with leaves you curious. I'll just say that it leaves you curious. Doesn't mean that they didn't solve the crime. No, it doesn't mean that they weren't able to figure out some things. Does it mean that everything is completely solved? No. It sort of leaves things like right dab in the middle, where you really do question, like, was this really what happened, or was it really this, or was it really that? You question. And I think that's what makes this film really interesting, is that it kind of challenges you, and it deals with the case in, I think, a fairly realistic way, and approaches the characters in a fairly realistic way, and makes it surrounds itself with an environment that works, I think, for this kind of a time period. So as to who would and who I guess would not enjoy this film, I think depends. If you do not like mystery or any type of thriller movie at all, you will not like this film. But again, I don't feel like it's over glorified. There are really intense scenes, especially when you do sort of witness the murders taking place. Again, they don't show who the Zodiac is, but they do present you with the murders. But they do it, I think, in a way that that seems like that seems fairly realistic in the sense of how these murders took place, rather than trying to be over, like just spewing blood at you, or spewing whatever at you, or, you know, constantly shooting or whatever. I like how it seems to be overall fairly subdued. I mean, yes, there's blood at points, and yes, it can get a little gruesome, but I don't think it's like a lot of horror films that are now today that are just over the top, just throw everything in your face. I like how this approaches it in a more mystery. And I think that's what a lot of mysteries actually end up doing. They don't really show you a lot of gruesome stuff like, I guess, what horror films do, but they show you enough to the point where you get it and you go, okay, alright, this is how they died, okay. You know, you don't really need anything else. And I think it approached itself really well, and I don't know why, but I feel like a lot of people don't really know this film. Not a lot of people talk about this film. But I think if you like the mystery genre, and I think it is actually a genre that is kind of going down the slopes, there's not a whole lot of mystery movies that, at least if I've heard of. It seems like now there's not really a whole lot, but if you want to see one that I think has some good performances, I think that has some that has an interesting story that was actually true, then this is definitely a film for you. And I'm sure if you like the film, you'll probably want to read more of the book, which has the same title. So I think that's definitely worth looking into. If you like these kinds of horror or kinds of mystery thrillers, this one I think works. As far as the accuracy and how close it is to the book, I cannot say, but I think it's definitely a journey worth discovering if you like this kind of film genre, if you like this kind of approach. And I really liked this approach because I felt like I was thinking while I was watching it. I didn't feel like I was just being entertained. Like, I was actually thinking about it and going, whoa, like, this is actually the way it's going. And there's kind of these twists and turns that the movie goes into. It doesn't feel like it really detours all that much at points. Maybe there are some scenes that maybe you could say, yeah, that they don't really serve that much of a purpose, but overall it seems to gear the focus on where it should be. And I like how it's not really, it doesn't approach itself like a lot of film making where we see like sort of a kind of 3-act structure where there's this complete like resolution and everything is answered for you. I like how this film leaves things open a little for interpretation and makes you think a little bit more. And it may run a little long for some. For me, I don't feel like it ran too long, and I think it kept me engaged. And I like a film that can make me think, and I think these kinds of films make me think, and make me wonder, you know, is this really are they really going to get the guy this time, and are they really going to find him? And that's what I kept saying to myself throughout the film. How are they going to get this guy? How are they going to find him? You know, where's it all going to lead to? And even in the end, even when nothing was completely tied up and wrapped up in a bow for me, it still left me thinking and kept me wondering, you know. And at the same time, it is that kind of a film where it knows how to be entertaining while also being smart. And I like it when a film can do that, and I think this film does it in a good way. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But I think overall it lends itself well to a recommendable viewing for those who enjoy mystery, who enjoy kind of puzzle solving, who think that maybe they have all the answers. But even I thought that too when I was watching the movie. But at the end of the day, it's still not all completely there. But it gives you a real sense of what the people were dealing with in this case, and how things sort of ended up, where the directions and turns went, and you feel like you can get invested in something. And I felt like I was invested because of the way the film presented itself and how it executed itself. And I felt like that a lot of the characters were really passionate about this case, and they really wanted to solve the mystery. And I think if you have people who are passionate about what they're doing, then it makes it more engaging for the audience and wanting to go along with them on this journey and figure out the mystery and sort of solve it, and maybe even at the end question things even more at the end. So I think that's really all I can say about this film without spoiling anything for anybody, because again, this is a really plot-driven film. Just know that it's not really that character-based. You're not going to get really full fleshed out, you know, and get into the psychology of a particular character, but you will get a sense of who's who. You'll get a sense of Mark Ruffalo's character. You'll get a sense of Jake Gyllenhaal's, and also Robert Downey Jr., who again is hamming it up. I don't think he overhams it, because again, he's not in all of the movie, but he kind of gives he kind of comes in at points to I think sort of bring out the kind of energetic atmosphere that the film doesn't have in the other characters, because again they're so focused on the case. So having Robert Downey Jr. there is almost kind of like, oh, he's coming along, yay, I wonder how this is going to go. But you'll also see too how he does take the case seriously and how he is passionate about it at points as a reporter. So but understands that he is limited in the capacity of what he can and can't do. So he's just not in it for that long. So that's all I can really say about his character, though. But ultimately, I think I can just wrap it up by saying, if you like mystery thrillers, this is definitely an interesting case and an interesting movie that discusses this case. And it is interesting how they went on for within this 10-year span. It says from like 1960s to 1970s was when the Zodiac killer was around, and then you really see how to the time period and how limited they were back even in the 1960s and 70s to solve certain crimes compared to the massive amount of technology we have today. So, and I guess communication as well. So that's really all I think I can say ultimately. But if there are any questions, comments, concerns, more than happy to answer them. But until next time, everybody.